What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpollia sitting on the couch, making some money, investing in fractional real estate online. As usual, today we're going to be talking about Mogul's latest listing. They just keep pumping these out. This is the Stone. It's a long-term rental in Colorado Springs, Colorado. It's 4 units, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths per unit. It appears to have just been fully renovated. I'm going to go over, let's see, I think they talk about it on the next page. But it's fully renovated. The seller is going to lease it prior to us closing on it. So it's going to be delivered with 4 tenants in place, that are paying at least $14.95 per month. This is something that I think could be problematic, and I'm going to talk a little bit about. They mentioned it's already been appraised. It's $20,000 above the purchase price. So I'm not going to even talk about the valuation at all. We have an appraiser. They've put a value on it. I think for a lot of different reasons, the third-party websites like Zillow and all the valuation sites don't do a great job on multifamily properties anyway. I'm from the value side, I'm just willing to take the appraiser's word for it that we have, it is as good as they say it is. Yeah, they say top to bottom renovation with 2025 capex, new roof and furnace, in-unit washers, dryers, all the good stuff, right? But okay, 6.36% yield, not a fantastic yield. Average yield 9.0. Now, if you remember, so this is the Stone. This is the property we're talking about. We have 2 other. Mogul has 2 other long-term rentals in the Colorado Springs market that they are currently marketing, neither of which sold out, right? These are not selling out. There's $96,000 remaining on the Parker, and there's $32,000 remaining on the Peterson. These aren't selling out anywhere near as fast as the higher yielding pad splits. I think it's really clear that people are on this platform because they're looking for deals that are providing a higher yield. But if you look at this one, even though it was freshly renovated, the projection, which is nice, but the projection shows that it is going to have the lowest average yield of all of these deals, right? And also the lowest IRR. So if you're shopping and you're comparing these 3, that's one point of comparison that would be important to me. Especially this doesn't have in-place income. I believe both of the others did. I'm going to jump into a couple of things, the easy stuff to get it out of the way, and then I'll talk about why I think the rental, the way they're setting up the rental could be problematic. I don't know. But before I forget, please like and subscribe. In the description of this video, I have links to all the places where I'm currently investing in fractional real estate online. Mogul being one of them, but all the places. Make sure you're doing your own due diligence on all of those platforms and on any of the properties. Just because I'm talking about one of these deals doesn't mean that you should or shouldn't buy it. I'm trying to share my insights, the way I'm thinking about it, my results with everybody. But really just want you to think about how this deal works in your portfolio, works for you, for your risk tolerance, for your timeline, all that stuff. And don't just buy something because I do, and don't just pass on it because I do. You've seen me make money on deals and lose money on deals at this point if you've been watching for a while. Also in the description of this video, I have a link to the Discord channel that I set up. There's over 270 of us now. In there's people every day sharing due diligence, sharing different platforms, sharing strategies, just talking about fractional real estate on a regular basis across multiple different platforms. And so please feel free to join that. There's no cost. It's not a sales funnel. I will not DM you trying to sell you anything or ask for money from you for any reason whatsoever. If you get those DMs after you join, report the person doing it. There has been an imposter that created an account that looks like mine. But yeah, please join, take part in the discussion, ask questions, share some info on all these Mogul deals. We have quite a few people now. Brad, Michael, Ike are pretty regular in there. I'm sure there's others. I think I noticed someone named Alan asking some questions, but there's people in there on a regular basis that are actually trying to work together, figure out, are these deals, are they not, answering questions, and that's the whole goal of the channel in general. I'm hoping that we can all help each other, build a community and actually figure out, okay, how do we all make money investing in fractional real estate? That's the whole goal. So back to this property. Okay, some of the easy stuff. FEMA flood map looks pretty good to me. I believe that we are just in an unshaded X. Yeah, I did get this this other zone to finally load this AE zone, so I don't think that there's a zone that just hasn't loaded. I don't know why. Sometimes the FEMA site is really slow, and you sit here and wait a little while, but that's what I did. Looks good to me. I was happy with it. The spot crime map looked pretty good. This was only let's see, it's almost 2 weeks of data, or week and a half, 2 weeks, and it had to create a pretty broad map area to get enough enough things. So yeah, we've have a theft here, but overall this looked pretty good to me. I did check it out on Neighborhood Scout too, just because I don't know, I've started to, even though I really like spot crime, I realize I like it the most when it's a property that I keep checking in on, right? Like areas. So it works really well in my market because I'm always looking at areas, and so over time, as information accumulates, I think it's much better having this short time period. And we saw this in a recent video. If I can look at this spot crime a couple weeks after somebody else, or even sometimes a couple of days, and have a very different result. And so I think I'll probably, and I've always used this here in San Antonio, and I'm trying to really learn and understand neighborhoods, but I do continually go back to the same places regularly and look, and we don't have the benefit of that here when we're shopping for a property that might only be listed for a little while. So anyway, probably going to start just looking at Neighborhood Scout a lot more often. It's this area here, somewhere right around here is where the property is. So it's one of these two colors, not the most dangerous, darkest shading, but pretty. It is to the right of the center, right? It's above average crime for Colorado Springs, Colorado. You can see this big area is just the airport, so obviously you'd expect that to be lighter anyway. I think that, I don't remember, but the other ones that we looked at were like in this, somewhere down southwest of this property, and I did check them out on the map. Yeah, down here. I didn't actually go back and look at, okay, how does that crime area compare to this one? If you watch the other video, I think I looked at it there. If not, you just have to zoom in and drag it around until you figure out, okay, how does it compare? Because this is, the reason I mention that is I think there's a real decision to be made, right? If you decided, yes, I want a long-term rental multifamily in Colorado Springs, Colorado, right now you have 3 options. And so for me, I think one answer might be, if I have a lot of money to put to work, I just spread it across the 3 properties, get a little diversification in that market. But if because if you're only going to invest in one, there's definitely some of these points of comparison, because we are both of the other 2, the Parker and the Peterson, are both down here, and the Stone, which is the property we're looking at today, is all the way up here. So yeah, understanding how these are different, could help you make that decision. Anyway, let's close that. I'm perfectly fine with that crime map, basically. But it is, it's not. It is not the the Class A type neighborhood, right? That's not what we're getting here. Even though, and that's one of the things that when I have talked about, okay, this is a core property. Yeah, it's a fully renovated, it's multifamily, long-term tenants. One of the things that a lot of institutions, when they're looking at, is this a core property or not, they're going to want their apartments to be Class A apartments in Class A neighborhoods for them to really want to call them core. Now, that's not something that all of them do, and that's one of the things that I struggle with, because I think that a lot of different institutions, I don't think that they use maybe they do now, because it's been a while since I worked on that side of things, but they don't have really tight definitions for this. But yeah, I mean, for what we're doing on Mogul, I think this definitely falls into the core category, stable long-term income. But I think that some people would say, well, the type of property and neighborhood that it's in, it's an older property. It's not, the class of property. Maybe they would say no. Although, because, I guess we're looking at strategies too, though, and there's not necessarily value add when you move further out. But it is just one of the things that, depending on who you're working with. I used to work with a lot of pension funds who almost everything they bought was core, but they had a really narrow definition that looks different than the way we're. And I think that's the one that like sticks out to me the most, because that's who I did a lot of work with them in private equity funds, and they definitely looked at things differently, right? Like the pension funds and some life insurance companies, and they were like, what they would think is a core asset is not necessarily what the rest of the commercial world did. And then of course we're moving this over to our residential investment stuff. And I know I probably talk about these classifications way more than I need to, because they don't really mean a lot to most people, is my guess. Anyway, moving on from that. I do want to just point out they did give us a lot more of a description on the what's actually being done. Okay, top to bottom, with new flooring, paint, cabinets, granite countertops, eat-in bars, stainless steel appliances, new windows, 4 new furnaces, and a new roof in 2025. That's a better description of a renovation than we've gotten from them in a while. Or than we get from them on average anyway. And so I like that a lot. I like that they've listened to that feedback. The pictures themselves, they look nice as well. It looks like it is a nice renovation. They should be properties that would lease up. But okay, now let's talk a little bit about that, right? The seller is going to deliver it to us with all 4 units leased at no less than $14.95 per month prior to closing. This does eliminate lease-up risk, like they're saying, and keeps it in line with their underwriting. What I'm worried about with this is anytime that when I've bought multifamily properties, I would much rather, if I have it's a vacant property, I'd rather lease those units myself. And so I make sure, one, that I'm putting it on my form lease that I like, or my property managers, and 2, that those tenants are being vetted properly, that we're looking at them, the criteria that we use to evaluate tenants is being used. They're not just putting any old tenant in there that's willing to sign and pay that amount. And so I've had a number of clients who've run into problems over the years because they've bought properties where somebody did renovate the property, lease it all up, but they just put the people in who are willing to pay the highest rent and not necessarily the most qualified tenants. They wanted to fill it quickly, and a lot of times you can do that and end up with a lot of problem tenants. And and one of the things is there's just this whole like cottage industry now to help tenants lie to landlords to qualify for leases, right? Like giving you like fake bank statements, fake pay stubs, like all this stuff. As much as it seems crazy, it's a real thing. There's now, especially tenants using AI to do this, and so property managers are trying to stay on top of that by really understanding what are the most recent risks, what's happening currently, what are the scams that are coming from tenants. And my worry is, if it's depending on who actually does the leasing for us, is it somebody who's going to be really diligent and be on top of that risk? Is it going to be the same manager that we're going to use? And that's the other thing too, is whenever it's my own property manager that leases to somebody, they have a much harder time pointing the finger and being like, oh, no, this tenant, somebody else picked this tenant. They can't say that, right? And they can't say, oh, well, we wouldn't have used this lease. Those sorts of things. So that's one thing that concerns me a little. The other thing that I worry about a little bit is, and I've talked about this quite a bit, is, when you have these nice, fresh renovations, you often get the best rent that you're going to get for a while, right? It's easier to rent a newly renovated unit, and often you're getting a slight premium. So how much does this $14.95, are we going to be able to grow from there, or is it going to be on the next turnover, we're lucky to get the same amount? And so because of that, I figured I'd look at Rentometer, look at Zillow's rentals and stuff. So, all I'm doing, just using, the free part of this, I still, I've never went back and got an account on here again to, to view the pro reports or anything. But so this is, you can put the address in and put 2-bedroom, 1-bath, looking at it as apartment rentals, they give you apartment or house. I'd really like it if, some of these tools would give you the option to say, okay, 4-plex, because yes, that's an apartment, but those rentals are going to be much different than apartments that are like in a large apartment building, right? But anyway, in this area, we would be at $14.95. We're above the 75th percentile as far as Rentometer is concerned, right? They're saying the 75th percentile is $13.64. We're counting on $14.95. So that seems aggressive, right? And I think, are we, do we have bigger units than average? Is it because of, the nice renovation? Is it, is this going to hold up over time? All questions I don't know the answer to, right? But things that maybe, if I were going to invest on this one, I'd want to ask those questions. And, I say if I were going to, and we've talked about this a few times, I'm just not that interested in the long-term rentals on here. I really like Mogul's pad splits. I like that they're able to, have a business model that's providing a decent yield at the par purchase price for long-term rentals. I think that Arc 7 arrived, and to a lesser extent, but even there's some options on Lofty that I think I'd rather just buy, because a couple of reasons. One, I don't think, the biggest one is I think we can get a real big discount on all those platforms I just mentioned, right? A big discount because they're not newly listed, right? Like Mogul at the moment is the only one that's putting out deals that at their par value, I actually buy some of them because I think they're good deals at the value they're putting them out at. All the other platforms I just mentioned, there are plenty of long-term rentals that are performing, but they only make sense to me if I'm buying them at a big discount from the initial par value of those shares. But those exist, right? Like, and so, it doesn't, I guess my point is I don't see that Mogul is adding a ton of value to these long-term rentals, right? There's not, buying these through them, there's not a large advantage, where right now they are the only game in town when it comes to, there's not a lot of great pad split properties on any other platform. And because of that, there's nothing else that has the same type of yield that we've been able to get on a lot of the pad split platform or properties. So anyway, I'm not going to buy this one, but I'm still, digging into it. One, because someday there will be a secondary market on Mogul, I believe. Maybe there will be discounts based on the way they talk about it. I'm not so certain, because I think that, I don't think that they'll be as deep. One, because on average they're putting out better deals, but really because I think that they're going to structure it differently. At least that sounds like that's their initial plan. Whether or not that it works out that way, we'll see. But anyway, that's the only reason I say if you're going to buy some of this one, this is something else I'd dig into, or I'd want to ask that question to them. And then also too, I was looking at Zillow average rentals, and again, I looked at both 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartments, and for that, the average is $1,261, and you've got some that are renting as high as $1,500, and even some even higher in this zip code. And you got to remember, we're only on Zillow, they're just using zip codes. Rentometers the same way. I pulled this up for both apartments and condos, and also for townhomes. I wish you could just pull them both up together, but you can't. Sometimes I think that townhomes are a better proxy for renting in a fourplex, right? Because it's not a big apartment building. It's I don't know, architecturally more similar oftentimes, and so this made me feel pretty good that the average townhome rent for 2-bedroom townhouses in the area is $1,525. So maybe our $1,495 makes some sense. This is the only one that really leads me to that conclusion, right? Like the really high end on Rentometer was $1,577. Is this just really high end? I don't know, right? And that's one of the things that I didn't even look at who's managing this. Who is the property manager going to be? Oh, they don't even have one listed yet. So I don't know who's doing the long-term, who is the long-term manager that they use in Colorado. I wonder if they don't have one picked out yet. Because that's going to play a big role in how this is handled over the long term. So anyway, the only other thing I wanted to talk about that worried me with this one is it looks like it's on actually. So when we look at the parcels, and this view is not always perfect, but you can see it doesn't look like we have any actual access to a street. Now you can say, well, wait a minute, when I look at this layer, yeah, I can just drive right here. But this appears to me to be a driveway. Now, we have some sort of right to it. Maybe there's an easement. I don't know, but it does look like we're driving across this other parcel to get to ours. That's important because for a couple of reasons. One, depending on what our rights look like, and that's something we'd normally find out through a title search, right? And during that process, we find out what does the access to our property look like. That's definitely a question that I'd ask Mogul if I were going to buy this one. Is this an easement? Is there a private party road agreement where if they go and have to replace this, we have to contribute to that? Different markets handle stuff like this differently. I have no idea how it works in Colorado, and I haven't seen the title work, so I don't know if there's some agreement, right? If there's how that works, right? And in some locations too, if you have what they would a landlocked property is how they refer to this often. You get an easement by right, that goes directly. Basically the straightest path to a road, which might not necessarily be this in this location. And I don't know that that's the case in Colorado anyway. But this, it does create an additional wrinkle. I can't move the little guy. There we go. It creates an additional wrinkle when we're buying this that I don't, it's just a question that I don't have an answer to, right? Like, okay, it looks like we drive across this road. When we look at this road, it is not well maintained. It's not, I don't believe this is, I actually think you can see right here. It says private drive, no through traffic, dead end, private property. So we are, I believe this is where our access is. This owner may or may not be responsible for upkeeping this, and depending on the answers to those questions I mentioned, maybe if they do go and replace it, there's some expense that we have to incur. I don't know. I don't know the answer. What that situation is, but I think it's something I'd want to ask, especially because depending on what that answer is, sometimes like when you're looking at the value of properties like this, if this is a similar duplex and this is a similar duplex and this is a similar duplex, but ours is the only one that doesn't have direct street access, that might actually hurt our resale value. It might hurt our ability to lease it up. You know, it might cause some additional costs for us or headaches dealing with the neighboring properties. All of those things are things that could potentially be problems, and would be reasons where maybe I'd want a bigger discount, or maybe I wouldn't want to buy it, right? And that's stuff that comes up pretty regularly when I'm looking, you know, when you're looking at properties that have just sort of non-standard access. I mean, this is just such a weird, like you can see there's not another one anywhere around that has that. So it makes me wonder, like, were these a single, and there's not a, you don't see an address number. Maybe it's just because I've got the red flag on there. But it's, you know, maybe at one point in time, these were like an apartment complex, right? They were all owned together. I don't know. And then they were split up. I'm really not sure. But that's something that if I were going to buy this one, I'd want a really clear answer to the question of, what is my access? What do those rights look like? And are there associated costs that come with those rights? Am I paying, you know, is there any obligation for me to pay in order to get the neighboring property to maintain that driveway? And in addition to that, do I have any way to compel them to repair that, right? Like if this gets, let's go back down here. If this gets gets to be in much worse condition than it currently is, that's going to affect our ability to lease up this property. You know, I mean, right now, probably most people are going to live with it, but if it gets a lot worse, you know, maybe not. And so I want to know, how are they dealing with that? Those are some of the things that I do love, that these descriptions are getting longer and longer. I think maybe instead of having a big block of text, they could start to like break out, like, hey, this is our renovation scope of work. This is our underwriting stuff. You know, break it up into sections for us. But understand, you know, they should have one that's just really telling us the answer to like unique questions that come up, right? Because this is, you know, most of the time when I'm buying a residential property, my access to the property isn't a big concern. This is something that comes up all the time when you're doing commercial deals, because access is, you know, much more important and often a lot more convoluted. Sometimes you have like cross easements with neighboring properties and whatnot. I don't think that's what we would have here, because there's no reason for them to need to come to our side. But anyway, I think, you know, we do have the webinar coming up next week. My guess is this is not going to sell out super quick, so maybe you could wait and ask that question. But yeah, it's one that I want to, if anybody has asked that, I'd be curious to know what the answer is. And if you're going to buy this one, jump in the comments or in the Discord. Let us know why, right? What made you excited about this property? If you're not, and it's for a reason that I didn't mention, I'd also love to hear that, right? Like, one of the things that we should all be doing is helping each other avoid bad deals. If there's something about this deal that you think, oh, that's a reason not to buy it, and, you know, I didn't mention it, definitely share that with the group. Anyway, that's it for me for today. Until next time, I'm just going to keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.